Okay, so what's the domain of this function? Well, we got a square root in there. There's no denominator to worry about, but there's a square root. And doing square root of a negative doesn't work out so good usually. So whatever's inside the square root has to be positive or zero. So we just write that down. Whatever's inside the square root must be at least zero. And if I divide both sides by -1, dividing by negative flips the inequality, and the domain is all numbers that are less than or equal to 0. So you can't plug in anything outside of that. Otherwise, it'll give you square root of negative and it'll break the function, so to speak. Okay. That's kind of, the idea. So let's do one more real quick. So whatever's inside the radical must be at least 0. So if I do some takeaway, and then I divide by -1, solve for x, and that's my domain. Okay. And if you plug this function in your calculator and then go to the table or the graph, you'll notice that the function is only using numbers that are less than or equal to 8. Okay, so let's find the domain of this function. So we know that the denominator cannot be 0. So x cannot be -8. All right, we know that. Cool. But we also know that whatever is inside the square root must be at least 0. Okay. Now this one's just a little bit different because, if I multiply both sides by x plus 8, well, I get that. 7 is greater than or equal to 0, which is true, but not particularly helpful. So I have to think about it just a teeny bit differently. Let's think about it like this. 7 is always positive. Okay. So if x plus 8 were to become negative, then I'd have a positive divided by a negative, which would be negative. Oh, and then it would no longer be greater than or equal to 0, and that would be bad. So therefore, x plus 8 must be at least 0. Oh, my stylus is dying on me. Darn it. All right. So if I subtract 8 from both sides, I get that. Okay. And so I've got that. So what does that mean? Well, it means that for the domain, x has to be greater than or equal to -8. It's got to be -8 or bigger. But over here, we already determined it can't be equal to -8 for a different reason. Therefore, we're not going to be able to do the or equal to -8. All right. So our domain is just going to be numbers that are greater than -8. And that's it. And if you test that out on your calculator, look at the table and stuff, you'll notice that. So, so in interval notation, that'll look like this. Okay. And if we were to examine that on the calculator, okay, this is how it would go. I would first go here and say, all right, let's make a, let's plug in the function. So, whoops, that's not what I wanted. Down on the bottom, x plus 8. Okay. And then I will go, I can go to the table and look around. And we said anything that's greater than -8 is fair game. Well, yeah, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Those, you plug those in, I get answers. Yeah, they're all in the domain. But as soon as I hit -8, I get error. In fact, everything from -8 on is an error. So as long as we're plugging in a number that's bigger than -8, we're good. So for example, if we were to plug in numbers that are just a little bit bigger than 8. So let's go up 1/10 at a time. Notice, as soon as we get bigger than -8, like -7.9, yeah, it works. You plug it in, you get an answer. Everything's cool. Okay. On the graph of this thing, yep, it starts here at -8, at x equals -8, or well, just a little bit bigger, and it keeps going. It uses x values that are bigger than -8. You can see that on the picture.